Okay. Hey everyone, this is Jamie from IndependenceStTarot and Seasons in Ritual, and I have a very special guest today, Andre from Astrology Alert.
Hi, everyone.
And Andre, I don't know if you know this, but the people that watch my channel will know this is a special day because I'm wearing a t-shirt that actually fits correctly. So
Well, that's
honored,
impressive.
honored that you're here.
That's
So Andre
impressive.
was kind enough to come on and discuss the lunar nodes. As many of you know, the lunar nodes always go in reverse, and they have just changed signs. So the north node has moved from Taurus into Aries, and the south node has just moved from what into Libra? Oh, Scorpio into Libra. And
Right.
so it's
Backward.
okay. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so Andre, I'm going to pepper you with some questions.
Of
And so I
course. Yes, I'll do my best to answer.
okay, thank you. Thank you. So first and foremost, how long have you been reading astrology charts?
Oh, a long time since, well, I'm in my 43rd or 44th year doing this, but I started reading charts for people around 3 years into it. So 40 years, let's just
Okay.
say, yeah, a long time.
And so let me ask you, when you first started reading charts, did you incorporate the nodes at that time as well?
I I used everything that I
Mhm.
could find, and then as time was passing, I focused on some things more than others. And
Mhm.
the nodes were not the first thing I focused on a lot. That took a while, but then it became obvious that they're important. There's no question they're important. The question is, what are they important about? You know, what do they do? That's where it gets sometimes a little confusing, because you were mentioning the notion of the nodes are, how did you put it? The to do with fate, right? With to
Yes,
do with
people refer to them as the nodes of fate. I
no, right, right.
okay,
I mean, and the thing is, the whole chart is like that. You know, anything in your chart can be interpreted as your fate in some way.
right.
The nodes connect to the moon. You probably know this, right? That they're related to the moon's travel in a north-south direction, hence
Mhm.
the north node and the south node. So the way in Western astrology, for the most part, the way they're interpreted is the north is, it's also called the dragon's head. And
Mhm.
so it's the idea that it's an intake. This is where you take energy in. And then the dragon's tail, the south node, is energy is being put out in some way. It's the sort of the polarity.
Mhm.
And the general advice is to focus more on the north node in order to grow, because the south node is more karmic, or what you've already done. They'll might even say prior lives, you know, and that kind of thing. Or you could link it to the trajectory in this life, where you
Mhm.
say, okay, the south is what I maybe grew up with, what I know from what I was taught by my parents and so forth. And then as time passed, I tune more into my north node to grow, so to speak, right? That as far as fate, there is where, I mean, other than saying all the planets are that way anyway, what's fateful about the nodes that I notice is most interesting is that, um, and this I would point to in Vedic, they talk more about this. In Vedic, they really put a lot of importance on the nodes. They call them Rahu and Ketu.
Mhm.
Rahu is the north node, Ketu is the south node. And what they say, which is very true, is nodes, both for you and in your connection to other people, they cause a kind of obsession. You get seized. That's the way they use. You're seized by the energy. So if a person has a planet on your node,
Mhm.
uh, the tendency is for the person with the node to become, in a sense, overly focused on the other person. So, and you see this in relationships, one-on-one, or romance, or friendships, where you get these nodal contacts. And so in a way, yeah, that's fate, because that person has more karma with you, or they're drawn more to you for whatever reason.
Mhm.
And I would say that's the most true way to look at it, for sure. The person with the node is more vulnerable to be seized by the other person, but I see it go the other way as well. So in other words, anytime there's a connection between two people, that's how it's going to work. And then you work your karma through that, let's say, right? And then if you look at your natal chart, planets that are next to your nodes are going
Right.
to be really important. So if planets are next to your south node, then they tend to be something you are very familiar with, that you've always known, and you could use it excessively because it's familiar, it's what works well for you. So you won't want to go to the north node where it's likely to be better for you in terms of evolving over a period of time in your life. And if planets are near the north node, then those are the planets that you want to work with, right? And I know in my own case, when I was looking at it years and years ago, I thought, yeah, I seem to be on that Jupiter, Neptune, because I have Neptune next to the north node, Jupiter up there. And the things I was doing, for example, what led me to astrology was meditation. And meditation is very much a Neptune influence on the high side. Because planets, as I understand all these things, nodes included, they have a high and a low end. Like people will think, okay, Saturn is this, Pluto is that. Planets can be really good on one end and really bad on the other end, right? So it's almost like there's a high level for the planet, and then it descends and descends until you get total corruption of the energy. So Neptune, high end, is very spiritual, very connected to peace and happiness. Low end is lying, deceiving, gaslighting, drug use, really terrible, right? So the idea is obviously you go to the high end of that, right? And then, so from there, you can then look at things like, okay, now what you said earlier, that they've been in Taurus, Scorpio, and you picked up the fact that they're reversed, right? And by the way, probably know this too, that it's an 18-year cycle. So the nodes, if you start at birth, at age 9, they flip, and at age 18, they return to where they were. And they keep doing this throughout your life in 18-year increments.
Okay, so wait, let me stop you on that. Okay, so right now, or let's just use your chart because
yeah, in my chart, it's flipped over, I think. Is that correct? Let's see. So because they were just in the north node was just in Taurus, right? So
right, but in your birth chart, your south node is in Taurus.
Correct, right. So then now an interpretation of that would be to say that temporarily during this period that I've just been through, I would have, I'm going to say in theory, because the problem with all this is that there's so much going on in astrology that one of the problems with astrology is that you can find answers in so many different ways. And I use this at times to, for example, if I'm trying to resolve an argument about a house system or something, if someone says, well, no, look, see, it looks better in this system, but if I can explain it in some other way, I may not be drawn to that. It has to be only that explanation, right?
Right.
So, but a creative way, and I think it makes sense, is to think if the nodes are flipped, then temporarily, by doing the energy of the north node, I'm actually growing. I'm not stuck now. I'm doing Taurus, which is my initial thing, and it's actually okay. But then of course, you look at my chart and say, well, what does that mean? The way I interpret that is that my third, the way I read charts, by the way, I don't know if this is the same system you use. I use the whole sign system. So for me, it's 3-9, that axis where the nodes are. South node 3, north node is in the 9th, right? So they're flipped. So then the third is like an information house, gathering information, looking for example, more techniques, the third is like Gemini, it's raw data. The 9th is the big picture, Sagittarius, right? So temporarily I'm doing that, but you could also just say, don't even worry about the fact that they're flipped. The main point is that the nodal axis, right, south-north, is triggering that axis. So I'm working in that area more, right? Versus now it's flipped to because it's moving to Aries Libra. Now it's my second 8th house or houses, right?
Right.
Yeah. And in your case, you went from, so you have Aries, so it was 6-12, right? And now it's moved to 5-11, which where they normally are, right? 5-11. So 5-11, 6-12 is a place to do self-work and meditate and practice and tune into ways to find your spirit. At least that's the highest thing I can think of. Though other times what can happen is a person can be doing standard repairs, like maybe they go more to the doctor or they do things to maybe the dentist, whatever, to fix things. But the raw idea is there's tweaking and repairing and improving, which is the natural Virgo Pisces, but now it's flipped into, in your case, it's Taurus Scorpio. Now it's gone to 511. So 511 is that's a creative axis. It's the house of children at 5. 11 is socializing with people. You're out there in society, but it's a creative axis. So it can bring you now during these years into more of a creative. You're trying to create things, literally, whatever it is that motivates you, because different people have different ideas around that, right? And then there's also the Aries Libra, because there you get into if you take Aries Libra just as they are, that's the natural 1-7, the relationship, me, the other. So, yeah, you can project. I mean, who knows, depending on where you are in your life, is it a children thing? Is it a romance thing? Because that's the same house. Could be a sports thing, games things, because that's also the same house. This is the thing with astrology, that you have to calibrate a chart, because you look at the chart, you don't know what that person is doing with that. To give you an example of the 5th house, I've had plenty of people immediately bring up children, because that's what it is. And I've had people, more than one, say to me, they have 5th house stuff, and they say, I'm trying to become a car dealer in Las Vegas.
Right.
Because that's gambling and speculation, which is the 5th house. So you have to, calibrate it by asking a question in that way.
Right.
Using the astrology.
And I agree with that too. I think one of the reasons that I liked watching your channel is because you interpret the houses more creatively. I think just saying the 5th house is children, I think that's super patriarchal. Like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Ooh,
Yeah.
right.
I'm wondering though, where's that coming from in you? Well, I guess I could speculate on the astrology, but the patriarchal part, what is that the sense that you interpret patriarchal as limited, as kind of too traditional and excluding, right? Is that the logic of what you're saying?
That, and just very oppressive, like it's supposed to be this way, like keeping people down and like putting them in two paths, like
Right.
or like, yeah, you're either married with kids and then that's it, or you're not, when
Right.
there's a huge
Yeah.
spectrum.
Yeah.
And I don't just see it as like through a feminine side, but just like for men too, like that idea, like, well, you need to go and get married and then be a provider. And that wasn't very helpful for them either. Like, not a lot of men like that pressure as well, so.
Yeah. No, it's true. I mean, this is the thing, that society is evolving, and so then what everyone agrees to changes, and then some people resist, and and right now my interpretation of that is the patriarchy. They can resist if they like, but there's one major problem they have from the planetary scheme. This is my interpretation, to each his own, but when Eris was discovered in 2005, and it was named after a female warrioress, that's the signal that women are on rising, and they have been. That's just the way it is. And not only women, but any category that has been left behind is ascending. And what's curious is Pluto is not exactly the patriarchy, but the patriarchy tends to be male, and Pluto is the sort of the bad boy. Like Pluto, women are vulnerable to the ultra confident male that is really anything from a controller to a stalker, someone who's into power games. So if Eris comes in and bumps Pluto out, that's the signal that something is changing in a big way, and that's what's happened. So all this that we're dealing with right now, all these fascist impulses, these are all patriarchal men that want to hold on to their power and oppress other people. But to me, it's a losing game. It can't sustain itself.
And I agree with that. And so, going with that theme, right, and these nodes. So let's say, like, again, nodes of fate. So would you say, because I always tell people, like, you don't want to be fated. You want to work with what's your destiny. So let's say, because on my mind, there's always like that voice, that male voice, and then it was a fated meeting, and then I'm always like, what?
That's funny.
So it's running my brain. There's other voices too, by the way, but and so when I say, well, they say, well, is this my fate? And I always say, well, I mean, you could meet this person, but then how do you work with that? It doesn't have to be your fate. It doesn't have to be your downfall. And so with the North Node moving into Aries is ruled by Mars.
right?
I see Mars, I believe Mars went through a huge transformation and he's more of that divine masculine energy. Um,
Hmm.
Even
Well,
though
ideally.
that masculine energy is what moves us forward. So
Hmm.
if we're moving forward in the North Node to become initiating, more of this is who we are. And so if we're focusing on that North Node, then would the South Node just automatically kind of be like moving things away, or is it fated because they both have to work together? Does that make sense? Is that
Yeah, well, so the logic would be that you use this north node energy, and then the south node manifests itself more naturally. But it's not 100%. I mean, with these things, it's not like you do everything just in the north node. But say,
right?
like for instance, in your case, if you don't mind me talking about your chart,
I don't give a shit.
so
Yeah.
if you're turning it over, so the north node now is in Aries. So
Hmm.
then the Aries is your 11th. That's your impulse to socialize and join the group. But that has, it's not just any, you step in a room and there's a group of people. Your channel, for example, is an 11th house, 11th sign manifestation, because it immediately involves other people nearby and far away.
Hmm.
So through working on that, the relationships and all of that, your fifth, which is your creativity, emerges, in part because if you're joining through the 11th, which brings in a certain responsibility to the group and so forth, and even if it's a tiny amount of pressure, it may be just enough to then trigger creativity in you, rather than you go right to the fifth, you ignore the group and just do your own thing, which is okay. Natally, that's who you are, and it's overall the better way. But temporarily, for now, the way the nodes are, it'll draw more attention to the 11th sign during this period. But really, it's doing it to both. Like, you're in a creative cycle now during this period. By the way, something else I'll tell you
Hmm.
about the nodes. They tend to be slippery in that this is something you could check with. There's a long-term astrologer named Stephen Forrest. He's done some great work, and I remember that running across this article of his after I already had the same realization, because I kept looking at the transits of the nodes,
Hmm.
and sometimes I would go, wow, that's amazing, remarkable, this thing just happened, and other times nothing, like it would
Hmm.
just be blank. So he says he's reluctant to assign too much meaning and create an expectation in a person. This is going to happen to you because the nodes are there.
Hmm.
Usually you need other planets for things to manifest really directly at a certain point. But the notion that you're in this 1.5 year period with that axis, the
Hmm.
511 axis in play, yeah, that's valid. And by participating, it'll be good for you.
And so, and I really appreciate the way that you explain that, right? Because it works in harmony. I find a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times when people come to me and ask me questions, they're first and foremost freaked out, which is cool. I got it. I got you, man. It's okay. Second of all, but it's just like, my life is doomed. I was born with these signs and they're pulling and they're
Mm.
fighting, and I'm always like,
No,
nah,
no,
that's not
no.
really.
It's
So,
not. It's not. Astrology is all. Astrology, to my understanding, is it's all onward and upward, in the sense that your chart is a map of the most you can do.
mhm,
But the most you can do, you got to find out. It's going to take you
right.
a while. Yeah. For instance, if you have a Mars, your Mars opposes your Sun and Venus, right? I don't know how many times you blow your top and get mad and scream at people.
I'm
Maybe you
much
say, "Oh,
better. I'm
you're
much
much
better.
better." Right? Okay, exactly. So, in other words, Mars down on the downtrend is an angry, combative energy. One of the ways, for example, I've discovered this. If you just observe yourself
Right.
living life. So at times I'll drop out of the astrology. I'll kind of forget where I am. And it is normally I know exactly where the moon is here. Like right now, the moon is in early Scorpio. I track all that. But there have been cases where I remember this instance where I was on a Mars transit, but I checked out of that. And at night, I was watching boxing videos, and then it kind of hit me. Well, that's Mars, because
Yep.
Mars is combat. You see people
Hmm.
punching, right? But then if you realize that in your life you're getting angry, you're getting overheated, you're getting irritated, that's the low end of Mars. The high end of Mars is taking action, just doing
Right.
things to move things forward, or asserting yourself without being too aggressive.
Hmm.
You could say it's a a lifetime job or a job of whatever number of years it takes, for that to happen. But having Mars in that alignment is good because you have more energy, right? It's just that now you have to channel the energy properly, right? That's the logic of that. Or your Moon Uranus, that Moon Uranus square, that's definitely anti-patriarchal because it's rebellious. Uranus rebels. It doesn't like following the status quo. You can do that in a good way or in a bad way. It's really easy to rebel for rebellion's sake, or be oppositional, or you can just be really independent, which is what Uranus is meant to be. But the thing is, when you start to do it better, you get a different fate. That's the thing that people miss, right? Different things happen to you, right?
Yes.
So that's why I call my astrology proactive, not predictive, because 80%, I'm not kidding, easily 80% of your life is what you're doing and it's coming back to you. Like you do something today, and 5 years from now, Saturn pays you a visit, shows you the problems with what you started, but it also shows you the benefits, and which outweighs what, right? That's the logic all the time, to be observing the chart and noticing, what's going on, right?
And I think too, when you put it that way, because like you said, you can see cycles, but I also think that gives people, are scared. A lot of people, they don't want to know because they're scared, because they're going to be like, oh, this is it. Like, this is what my life is, so I see that. And when you ask people for advice, or you go see astrologers or tarot readers, you also need to be in tune, right? Like it's important. You need to trust your instincts as well. Because I agree with Andre, like it's a growing, it's not set in stone, like everything can change. And it's important to me to find people that believe in that, because you want someone that's going to help you rise, and not just say like, you're screwed because your third house is full of
that's the thing. By the way, those are the messages whenever I hear a person tell me that they were told by an astrologer, you have for example, Mercury square Neptune to the third house. Yeah, it's valid to say, your mind is confused, but the whole point is, how do you unconfuse it? You don't just stop there. So Mercury square Neptune on the low end is confused. Go even lower, the biggest liars, like Trump, Mercury square Neptune. That's classic. I mean, they lie for it naturally, right?
Just no reason. They'll lie about anything.
That's right. Okay. But the logic is that Mercury square Neptune are also the best meditators, because Neptune is putting pressure on the Mercury, and Neptune is saying, get deep in there, space out in a really natural way, feel the peace. That's great meditation. That person has more insight. They'll actually know more about Mercury and Neptune and be able to teach it. So it turns out that the hard aspects in your chart are your treasures, because that's where you really become good at doing that very thing, because you start out not being good at it. Like, if like in your case, for instance, the way I read it, so if you have Mars and Leo across 3-9, you would be great as a teacher of anger management, right? Why? Because you figured out what that is. Even if you weren't necessarily all that angry, you have insight into the problem, because you have an opposition. If you have a trine, you don't even think about it. You just say, that's a talent. I've always been that way. It's much harder to teach it. It feels to you like, well, I was born with this. I mean, how can I teach you this? It's just natural to me. But if an area is more complicated, then you can teach it, because you're forced to evolve through those planets, right? So it's totally true that what you say is 100% true. This idea of gloom and doom, it doesn't work. I mean, if someone is having a Saturn, like right now, people that are Pisces, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Gemini, especially if you're early in the sign, you're getting Saturn. You better figure out a way to do that, because if not, Saturn will descend into, it's a contraction energy. So you'll get depressed, you'll be mopey, you'll feel hemmed in. You got to know what to do with it to put it into action. And by the way, I know this too, because I notice Saturn has the worst reputation. Yeah. People almost never do anything unless Saturn pressures them. Almost never. I
like Saturn.
You like Saturn? There you go.
Yeah, because I just think this is a new way to start talking about it, right? Like it's a new way to see the good of Saturn.
Yeah. And I mean, negatively, Saturn can be a patriarchal energy, because it's a kind of like the inertia of time, the inertia of how people think about something at any given point. And so you have to shake it up a bit. But for the individual, Saturn is literally the impulse, the energy, the passion, the desire, the desire to do something. And to work on something by sacrificing something, by focusing. The greatest thing about Saturn is focus, because it's a narrowing energy. You're bringing it in, right? If you focus well, you're fine. You'll actually point to your Saturn transits as your best periods, because you're actually, enjoying the growth that is coming through. Well, maybe I'm being a little bit too optimistic, because I talk like this, but every time Saturn visits me, it gives me another slap. Bam! You forgot this.
Well, like you said, my son is in Aquarius, so I am like, I'm an optimist. I'm like, yeah, we can do this. And they're just like, you're gonna climb that mountain. I'm like, yeah, we can totally do it. It's fine.
Yeah, no, and you have a Jupiter rising too, which is another, strong asset. Around Jupiter and positivity go really well together. And notice too that your Jupiter is in sextile to your Saturn, right? So like they're 60 degrees, pretty tight from each other.
And that's my birth chart, right? That's not what's happening right now.
That's your birth chart? Yeah, your birth chart. Yeah. So you know that you've got these. You probably know a little bit about. Anyway, so Jupiter Saturn. So Jupiter Saturn in sextile. What's good about that is that they're the two most important forces. That's a separate topic. We could do another hour on this, because it's.
You said it. We're gonna have another episode.
Sure. Yeah, okay, you can come to my channel and we'll talk more. So Jupiter Saturn, they're the two most important forces in your chart next to the sun. It's sort of like Sun, Jupiter, Saturn, then the rest. And it's because in the solar system, those three are by far the biggest forces.
Right.
If you saw the numbers, it blows your mind when you see the numbers, like what these planets weigh, like their mass. And you just notice that after the Sun, Jupiter, and Saturn, you got nothing. It's just lots. It's like peanuts, right? Yeah. So Jupiter, Saturn, they're both for yourself, and meaning your well-being, who you are, etc., but also your impact on society. So having Jupiter, Saturn in sextile means you can more easily make the connection between the two and find a way to move yourself forward through focusing and then expanding, focusing, expanding. When they're square or opposed, it can take the person longer, to find their way, because they resist some of the social forces.
And I was going to say, what's interesting about that too is that I believe that when Jupiter and Saturn were kissing in like 2020, when they had that.
Yes. Yeah, that's one. That's pretty funny. They were kissing, right? What was Pluto doing? Because it was in there too. They were having a threesome.
Yeah, it's wild. It's pandemic times. So
yeah, no, that was. By the way, there was a Frenchman, my namesake, Andre Barbeau, in 2011. He said there's going to be a pandemic in 2020, and he was pointing to those three planets. So he had done research on that particular area because he was more interested in the world conditions and that, and because you can go back to previous pandemics all the way back to like pre-Roman times. Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto tend to be doing a dance, and then you get a pandemic. But yeah, right. Your point is that they were together, right?
Yes, they were together. And so to me, though, that was ushering in this age of Aquarius. And I say that because I know you believe Aquarius started when Uranus was discovered.
Right. Well, okay. And so this is the thing that.
Well, I just wanted to say, so it's important, like different astrologers have different opinions. And my friends thought Aquarius started when Pluto hit it and then backed back out of it not too long ago.
Right. So, but Pluto was in Aquarius, though. Pluto was in Aquarius around the time when Uranus was discovered in 1790, Pluto was in Aquarius too. So this is 250 years after that. So which Pluto, unless you then say it only counts after we discovered Pluto, right? Like the logic that I use is that Uranus as not the ruler, but it's associated to Aquarius. Let's just say that I can tell that it has connections.
Right.
And to me, if you think about an age, it's when Uranus was discovered was electricity, and electricity led to industrialization, and it led to way more freedom for people. For all the complaints that people have, just tell them, you're turning on that light. You don't even think about it. If you go back to the time when Benjamin Franklin and these guys were writing the Constitution, they had a kerosene lamp, and I mean, things were much harder. Right. Now, all kinds of things are happening. Anything you see around you is electricity through different mediums, whatever. So technology as the age of where people, because think about it, what is the age of Aquarius? Or how do you understand it? Is it around more people having more freedom, or how does it work?
So I feel like the age of Aquarius for me is people having more freedom, but really getting in touch with themselves. Because to me, Aquarius is I always say this, people on my channel knows, but like the individual first, and then the community. And so when the age of Aquarius is here, we start to wake up to the idea that we can be unique and we can be ourselves, but we also see how that works together. There isn't any
Yeah,
hiding.
exactly.
There's no
Right.
fear, like it is people getting along. Like at the same time, we will have normal problems,
Exactly.
but
Exactly.
but there is a greater awakening to like, I can do this and that's fine, and they can do that, that's fine, and we can all get together and dance at a concert or feed the homeless, or it doesn't matter, but
Exactly. Yeah.
it is a
Yeah.
strong understanding of the self.
Right. Exactly. I mean, if you think about it, Uranus is exactly that. It's both intense individuality, but within the group. So, and what happens when Uranus is discovered? Electricity is discovered, and mysteriously, you start to see democracies all throughout the world. That's when they started, the American democracy, but many others. Because I had people on my channel say, "Oh, that's wrong. The Iroquois invented democracy long before that, and the Greeks." I know, but it didn't go anywhere. The whole point is this only counts when a lot of the planet says we want democracy. And notice that countries that are not democratic, they pretend that they are. It's almost like they'll say, no, we have a democracy. But like Russia is not really democratic.
No.
China says, China's probably the one that is most clear in saying that they're not a democracy. But the idea of democracy is really entrenched. And that's the power of the individual, but also within society, because, this doesn't happen in a cave. Right.
So do you think, like you're saying, like the Iroquois and the Romans or whatever,
or the Greeks, because they, Athens had democracy apparently, from what I read.
You were there, Andre. Come on.
I was.
Yeah, I'm sure.
People tell me things about, and I'll say I don't remember that.
Yeah. And so to me, like, it's this idea, like, so, because the way they did democracy worked for them, correct?
Yeah, right.
So
no,
you're
exactly.
saying because it didn't spread. That's the difference.
Right, because when you're talking about an era, for it to be an era, a lot of people have to participate, right? Gotcha. So to say that someone invented anything, maybe everything has already been invented, but it's only when it's adopted, right? So yes, the Greeks did it for a period, but in between that and now, there's been barbaric, forms of government, lots of kings and fascists and whatever. Now there is a really big block in the world. Currently, it's experiencing some problems, but the logic is individuals get their say, and you do it within society. That's Uranus. Uranus is, I'm an individual, but I want to be in the group. It's not Aquarius. Aquarius isn't the person that says, I'm an individual, I'm going to go hide in a cave. No. Maybe if it's like in my chart, it's in the 12th house, so maybe that would fit, right? To disappear somewhere. But for the most part, it's within the group. Right. And so it fits the definition really well. But you could also be right that Jupiter in Aquarius plus Saturn in Aquarius, which we just had, could lead to maybe more of that. Or, or is your theory that this is it? This is the beginning. The rest is we'll just, ignore it.
My theory is, like, to me, this is the beginning. I don't disagree with what you're saying, because I'm sure there will come something up in my life where I might be like, I don't think so. At the same time, I really feel pretty good with, the way people perceive things. And like you said, you can point to many things through astrology that support your theory. So I don't think it's wrong. To me, though, I see it happening then, because the way how things are like ending that age of Pisces, to me makes more sense how things are lining up now, in this, like, what I would say in this age of Aquarius. Now I know, like, mathematically it's not supposed to happen for like another 250 years or so.
No, even more, because what they're doing is they use the constellational location, and so they know it's 600 years. It's far away. Yeah.
Right. And so I always say, because I'm an Aquarius, I'm the future. And so I think it's starting now, because we're always in the future. So we can see the future.
Okay. So fine. Yeah. you get to decide whatever. See, this is the thing that then because I'm a Capricorn, you have Mercury in Capricorn. The Capricorn energy is where you then say, okay, great. So what's next here? And then really it's like, then you say, get back to work. Let's get back to the practical. Like, what are we going to do to bring this into the world?
Right.
And then these other ideas, they're interesting, right? But unless you plan to spend your life speculating on whether it's
Yes,
this age or that age, or then the idea is to, if anything, is to join and make it happen. Like you be a conduit for this new age of Aquarius in whatever way you think is
I
right, is
agree.
valid.
And I agree with that. So I feel like this now, like having this conversation with you, like helping people understand that, they can read their birth charts or have people read their birth charts and get a better perspective of where they are in life and where they can go. That strengthens their individuality.
Mhm. Right.
And then they can see how it can help them, move within society,
Mm.
or help bring other things into society where people may have been confused before. Because
Yeah.
that was like,
Yeah.
because a lot of people do get stuck. I know I'm going to take it all the way back to the nodes. um they really get nervous, like they're like fate, oh, like the word fate I think gets too ingrained, I guess, in this. And because it is this idea that people have to get used to, like things change, and I think it's so interesting. And maybe it's because of the industrial revolution, and people working, before people used to work for a company and then retire and then die. And that was kind of like the idea that I grew up in, right? And then that didn't happen. I mean, gig economy, baby, like no, all this stuff. And
Mhm.
so it was just this weird idea that people were like, wait, I can change, like I don't wait, I can have different ideas. And so to me,
Mhm.
that's part of that awakening with Aquarius.
Mhm.
And so that's
Yeah.
a good reason
Yeah.
why.
It's true. It's true. No, and it's, I mean, if you think about it, if you take a chart of any person in a society where there are a lot more restrictions. For instance, in India, in their system, they tend to be more fatalistic in their
Mhm.
astrology, but they're also born in a caste and they can never get out of the caste. It's very hard.
Right.
So then that's where you'll say, oh, I see Saturn, and you start to say this person is stuck and whatever. But in modern democracies, people have more of an opportunity to educate themselves, move up, do what they want to do to what is in essence improving their chart, because the chart is waiting for you to manifest all the points better and better, all the angles. You learn, you discover who you are. You could do it without the chart too, by the way.
Right.
Many people do this and they never look at a chart. But the chart mirrors the thing that you're doing, and then you get a different result. Literally, this is what's behind the so-called attraction principle. You're attracting the vibe that you've created in your
Right.
chart. And the vibe is the harmony you've created. And
Mhm.
that's a mystery everyone has to solve for themselves, and so fate, the idea of fate, that's just fear. When you say like that,
Mhm.
fear. So the solution is just relax, relax. There's no
Yeah.
problem. Do things to open and relax rather than focusing on, oh my God, I'm in whatever. I don't know. I mean, there are many things. The
Right.
planets in that way are always out to get you, in some way. And I mean, I'm trying to be funny, like the
Oh, I
notion
was
that,
like, "What? Oh, everyone's gonna remember you said that," and they're gonna be like, "Wait a minute."
yeah, well, out to get you in the, it's, but I'm being, I'm doing my comedian thing is to say,
Mhm.
of course, if you see Saturn about to oppose your sun, it's way more challenging than, say, the total opposite would be Jupiter goes over your sun, right? I mean,
Woo.
totally obvious, right?
Yeah.
It's a feeling, you can feel it. It's in there.
Mhm.
If this weren't true, astrologers would have given up long ago.
Right.
Scientists think astrologers make stuff up. No, there's nothing made up. You can feel it if you
Right.
just watch them go by, right?
And I think that's really important too, because working with like that divine feminine energy that's rising, it is feelings, it is this intuition. And
Yeah.
I noticed a lot of times, like when things were coming through, and you could say if I was being intuitive or channeling, however you want to say it. So what I started doing was like looking back on the astrology, and I was like, oh, okay. And so I thought then it was really important to start talking about astrology. So people could start seeing that, especially during the pandemic when everyone thought this was it and it was real dicey for a while. Just to point to things saying like, look, it's okay, we're going to be able to get through this, and to see like how there can be patterns, but you don't have to repeat them, like, oh,
Right.
that's part of
Right.
waking up when you're like, oh, wait a
Yeah.
minute. I
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, you just said it exactly. That's the whole point, is that if you, well, a lot of the astrology study is, I think having a really good memory helps a lot, because the idea is, where was I? What was I feeling? What was I doing? And then when it, say Saturn, for example, pays you a visit,
Mm-hmm.
what happens on the next visit? Where are you? What's your ability to stay relaxed and stay focused, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's really, Saturn is like an overfocus energy. And that the part I miss when I'm not under Saturn is when I notice when I'm under Saturn, my focus increases. I get more willful and directed. I do things, with a purpose. And I don't mind the discomfort at first, because when you're doing something that's a bit hard, you kind of, I got to spend time doing whatever. But then you get it done. And then you realize
Right.
there it is, right? It serves you. Because if you think about Saturn, Saturn rules your bones. So it's a planet that wants structure. It builds things. So anything that you see it as form is Saturnian. So it's really important in life, whether
Mm-hmm.
you're building a business, whether you're building a structure like a home or a car or whatever you're going to bring in, or even your own personality, your
Mm-hmm.
own sense of who you are has Saturn overtones as well, because it's the deepest habits that you have, the deepest structure, right? Even though, when you think of bones, you wouldn't think of your mind being in your bones, but it's kind of like that.
Yeah, yeah. How you think about things is how we build structures. If we think
Yeah.
we could do it, we're gonna build it. So
Yeah, that's also true. Yeah, no,
yeah.
exactly. Both of those, yeah, they work together. So,
Okay. So I'm gonna ask two more things about the nodes. We did a great job. I was trying to like box you in on the nodes, but you're like a wild animal, Andre. I can't keep it boxed in.
sorry.
That's
Okay,
it.
yeah.
I don't
What can
care.
I?
It's good.
I know I went off. If I start talking astrology, yeah. So,
I
but
appreciate
okay,
that.
I can if I really, speaking of focus, I can
I was
stay on
gonna
one
say,
topic. Yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah,
just gonna
yeah.
check to see like where's your Saturn today? And then you could tell me, and then I'll be like, oh, okay, we can focus now.
Yeah, no. Well, Saturn is in. No, I know what it is. Okay, so here's the answer to that.
Hmm.
So my Saturn's in Sagittarius, but the reason I'm perhaps a little over enthusiastic is the moon is right over my Jupiter right now.
Oh, very
So
nice.
yeah, so then
Oh,
Jupiter energy gets focused more for a period, right?
yeah.
If you talk to me, if the moon is over my Saturn, then you might get more of a Saturn message. That's by the way, one of the best ways to study astrology is track the moon. Just follow it going around and feel it as it's touching your planets by
That's
conjunction, square, opposition, like that.
my friend Helen and I, we always talk about the moon just kind of generally for people. And that's okay. So I'm going to ask you three things then. Okay. So,
Okay, three
okay.
things. Here we
Yes.
go.
So
It's
the first
lightning
thing,
round.
yeah. So the first thing would be if people are interested in astrology, okay,
Mhm.
but they're not going to track it every single day. You know what I mean? Like, I know a lot of people have Co-Star. Ooh, I don't know if I should say that. I know a lot of people have an app and it's very sarcastic and they don't like it anymore. And I always tell them, well, then get rid of it. Okay.
Mhm.
Um, because they're still depending on something to tell them their mood and if they're going to be lucky that day, right? So what little bit of advice could you give to people that want to keep up with or kind of delve into this? Like what is the best advice you can give someone? Just what you said about knowing where how the moon is interacting with each, would you say like their house? Like the how like how
Well,
they
the
interact with it?
planets, like for example, so right now the moon is in Scorpio early, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, just eyeballing it, you know that the moon moves about a degree every 2 hours, a little more because it's often more like 13 degrees. So over the course of an entire day,
Mm-hmm.
but just if you're just doing it as a ballpark, you'd say because your sun is at 5 degrees Aquarius,
Mm-hmm.
about 10 hours from now, it's going to square your sun, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is a very different feeling than when you find it, for example, in the previous sign in Libra, when it was at 5 degrees Libra, that's a trine.
Mm-hmm.
If you just do that, if a person tracks their squares and their trines, it's so obvious why
Mm-hmm.
trines are easy and squares are not, because
Mm-hmm.
you'll feel the energy of the square. That also helps you to understand squares and then recharge through the squares and all of that. But as far as what you said with apps and things like that, I feel like there's this really funny thing with someone who was a comic many years ago, Bob Newhart. There's this hilarious scene where he's counseling someone and she's saying to him, I have this problem. I do this thing with my mind and it drives me crazy. And he just looks at her and he says, stop that. Just stop it. Don't do it anymore. Which of course is silly because they're
Yes.
therapists. But the point is, I don't recommend things where you're looking at something that tells you something about how you should feel or not feel. I mean, it's okay and fine if you feel good doing that. Anything that makes you feel good, whatever. But it sounds like I'm not sure how the one you describe works. But is it that it gives you sometimes
I
advice
mean,
that is not so good?
well, first and foremost, it's extremely sarcastic.
Yeah, well,
So I
that's
had
not
it on
good.
my phone for a while and I was like, who's writing this? Virgo? I'm just kidding. That's a joke. That's a joke.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, right. It's a,
resolving. Okay. Um, so I took it off my phone, but what you do is you put your birth time. Like so many people do now know their birth time and everything. So it
Mhm.
gives you where all your houses are and stuff like that. And so it's supposed to be tracking your transits, but at the same time, like I said, I think it keeps people, I think, not optimistic. It keeps people. I find like people are like, oh no, it's first of all it's sarcastic, but it's not allowing people to feel what does this square feel like for me, and like
Right.
taking a little note, or what does this trine feel like for me. And then like of course it's always going to say your luck's going to be really good today, and people are, so they're just like, is this my lucky part, or is this the lucky part, is this the lucky part, instead of just kind of going with the flow.
Right.
Which
Right.
when you read the charts, like you could say, okay, this is how this could be flowing, and if it's a little opposition, okay, we'll see what that feels like. You know what this feels like flowing. So what does opposition feel like? And it might be really hard, but it might not be, so
Yeah. Well, and the thing would be that in writing it, which across the years I took a crack at that a few times, but I never liked the fact that you're giving a person a cookbook thing. But it would be a worthwhile project to, for instance, if you're writing all the possible moon things,
mhm.
is you want to explain what to do with it. Literally, like here's what's happening, here's what you can do, here's what you probably shouldn't do, and it's all onward and upward. Don't waste any time on this is bad luck and all this kind of thing. No, you're turning back, always turning good, difficult energy into good, and enjoying the good energy when it's there. Because by the way, when the energy is good, really flowing, that's also when people get sloppy. Like if you're on a trine and your general overall tenor is negative, you'll do something like naturally, but it'll be the wrong thing. It'll seem to you like, for instance, a politician will blurb out something. It will
Because
say, "Oh,
they're
it's like this," and then people go, "Whoa, what did you just say? That was terrible."
yeah.
They run into that problem after the moon leaves that spot. So,
Mhm.
but all of this in the end is the awareness that something is happening in your chart. So,
Mhm.
if you're following an app, it's telling you where it is, then it should be good text. Otherwise, yeah, I agree with you. Don't tell people, give them shallow messages or negative messages. Yeah, for sure. No
Okay.
question.
And then the last things, going back to the nodes. Okay, so
Mhm.
we have what, about a year and a half, not quite, with these nodes, North Node, Aries, South Node, Libra. What can you say? So like, what can you just like some advice just to give people to work with this? Because they always start at the 30th, and then they go to the easiest, as because they're going backwards.
You're going backwards. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And
Right.
so just some advice on like when you're working with these energies, what would you say? Would you look to see where it's like what's transiting with that, or what's getting close to it, so they can learn like, okay, this is what I want to do in order to keep evolving.
Well, I mean, the thing is that this is the problem with astrology that if you tell everybody, every person, this is
Mhm.
the message, then the problem with that is like a start would be to see where in the chart those nodes are
Mhm.
to give more point. Like I said, in your case, it's the
Mhm.
fifth, 11th sign. So by the way, you also can do the nodes where you live because the relocated chart shifts. So you were born in the near the in the coast. When you move west, your ascendant will go backward, so that it might be Taurus where you are. Let's say, for example, so it might shift the nodes in
Mhm.
there. So there's that as well you could consider.
Mhm.
But if you say everybody, you don't know. I mean, people they may not even know. So
Right.
then, if you just focus on Libra and Aries, that's the sign of self and the sign of other. It's the
Mhm.
most pure I, my, me, you, the other person. So, uh, the general advice would be focus either on finding your individuality, who you are and what you want to do, and stop worrying about what other people think. That would be going toward Aries. But there will be people that actually is the other way around. They're better to, maybe they've been too selfish and too self-involved. The opposite is true. Focus on your relationships, learn to be with people, get in a rapport, things that are relational. So it's that axis, I'm here, you're there, the relationship pattern. It's the most pure because you always think of it as Aries, at least I do. I think of it as the natural first sign and Libra as the natural seventh. So self, marriage, self is sunrise, sunset. That's how those two work. Does that make sense?
Yes. And I think that's a really beautiful way to say it, because a lot of times when I do it, I'm just like Aries, Libra, but to focus on relationships and allow people to explore that, like whatever that means to them.
Whatever it means to them, because a person, if you say to a person, it is the North Node in Aries, so really you should be focusing on yourself, but then they might be in a phase of their life where the complete opposite is happening. And if they do that, they'll ruin the relationship or not do well with that. So it might be that the other node, is the side of the node, is more important. And really, to do that, you still have to focus on yourself, right? Because in a certain way, how are you gonna focus well on relationships if you're not paying attention to what you're doing and how your energy is being released? Like, for instance, Aries is very forward and direct and blunt. That sometimes doesn't work well with relationships because you need to soften it, type thing, right?
Yeah.
Another thing too that I can think of is Aries Libra. It's cardinal, and it's the most initiating. Aries is the most spring, start things. So for a lot of people, what can hold them back is they're in their mind. Just start something. Don't worry if you don't finish it. It's not important. People will target Aries in a negative way by saying, oh, Aries is always starting things and never finishing them. That's not a problem, because if you keep starting and leaving things behind, eventually you'll do the thing that feels good to you.
Right.
So taking action is really important, really important, because it always shows you the power of whatever was in your mind. It shows you whether it works or not. You get feedback, and then you adapt that, and then your mind thinks better. So that's why the cardinal signs are considered often really important: Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, because it's the idea of taking action and starting something to see where it goes.
And did you hear that, Cancer? I always tell Cancers, you guys are cardinal signs. You can start things. And they're like, really? I just thought I was supposed to cry because I'm water. And I'm like, no.
No. Oh, another thing too. A quick thing on the nodes. The nodes, this is really curious. In the US chart, the chart that I use for the US, which is Sagittarius rising. So they're cutting across the, so it's reversed to yours, Sagittarius rising, right? So, but it's the same 511 axis. So first of all, that's the election axis, because Aries is the place where you have a contest or a competition. So elections go in that house. But it's also, as soon as you see that, it's children, and it's related to the women's rights. That's going to be a big topic in the next year and a half.
Right.
We already know that in advance, right? But putting the nodes there hyper focuses the topic. And there may be other things that will come up related to that 511 axis, but that's in the US chart where it's affecting all the people living in the US.
So that's really interesting. Thank you for that. Because I think that, well, because a lot of times people are like, why is this happening now? And I think you can look at the chart and see these things.
Yeah, no, you see, the astrology that way is fabulous if people are willing to learn it and figure it out. Like, how Venus just went retrograde. You probably heard about that, right? So that is, when you see Venus going retrograde, you start to see more people pushing back against consensus, against the way things are normally done. That's why all those people are on strike. They're saying this isn't good.
Andre,
I need to push
back. I learned that from your channel.
Yeah, and I learned it from someone else.
So I say that now. I said I learned
it
from
it's true.
Andre.
It's true. I heard it from another astrologer. I wasn't paying attention that much to Venus, and he pointed out, in fact, Nick Dagan Best, he said, this was really clever, ahead of the George Floyd phenomenon, he was saying, this is in the US Mars, I'm seeing potentially police activity and some kind of problem, then people rebelling. it was like exactly that. Very unsavory though, but
Mhm.
and that, by the way, that leads to often to good change because people protest, and then the next thing you know, laws are changed, and
Right.
things happen. So it's a good thing, but you got to get through it, and it's not necessarily fun when you're in the middle. Like people are saying now that if UPS goes on strike, the public will be angry because they won't get their Amazon packages, right? So there's that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
exactly.
domino effect.
Yeah, the domino effect, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, Andre, thank you so much for agreeing to do this. I
Oh no, that
really
was fun.
appreciate
I
it.
enjoyed it. Yeah, anytime I get to talk, especially when I get to talk pure astrology, because often I have to filter it through something else. But if I'm just talking astrology, it's fun.
Well, you saw my Rising's Gemini on
Hmm.
my yeah, so I'll ask questions all day long, don't you worry.
Yeah, Gemini is always Gemini. Gemini is the natural third sign. It's the persistent gathering of information toward Sagittarius, which is you look at all that information and you say, what does this mean? And then you get a picture, like a broad understanding. That's the Sagittarius side of it, right?
Hmm.
So being that rising is the impulse, but it's also to communicate because Gemini is a natural communicator, salesperson, advocate, right? And then you get into other things like your Mercury's in Capricorn. I mean, you got to look at all the different patterns, right?
I'm
Of
like an
how it goes.
onion, so many layers.
Yeah, right. But I mean, yeah, it's a great language. I mean, this is where though I'm recommending people study it, but not most people don't, because they say it's too confusing and
Well, it's intimidating with like all the math and stuff. And so I try to help it become more digestible.
yeah, and there are ways to do that too. By the way, there are ways to make astrology really digestible without getting into the math. And by the way, math, the computer does it. You just need a program.
Yeah.
Like,
I
although
know it
you
does it
should
for
think,
me.
I mean, it tends to help to think when you're looking at it, does it make sense? Like, for instance, yours is 1:15 p.m. It's meant to be where it is. Like, you shouldn't see the sun below the horizon. That would be a problem. That would be that you drew the wrong chart. But the computers get it right. The
Thank
programs are accurate, so there's no problem. Yeah.
you. Thank you.
All right. So
Okay, we'll meet up again.
definitely, yeah.
Okay.
We'll meet
And
again
I
and
will
we.
probably have another topic, but next time I know it'll be a loose topic, and then I'm just gonna let
No,
you
it's
go.
okay. No, it's fine. I mean, whatever topic you like, I can make a pact and stick to the one thing if you like. It's not a problem. I won't
I
veer
want
off. I won't go off on
I want
tangent.
you to be you.
Well, no, but that's me too. There's the everywhere me and the more, we'll just do this topic and we're not getting out of the room type thing. It's
Yeah.
fine.
Okay.
Yeah,
Maybe we won't meet on the beach in the jungle. We'll meet somewhere else. We'll,
sure.
so
Yeah. Next
yeah.
time it'll be different. Yeah, the backgrounds will change.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. This has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was great. I enjoyed it
Okay.
too.
All
All
right.
right.
See you guys next time.